The Lockheed Ventura was never meant to fly daylight missions over enemy territory. Too heavy to outrun German fighters, too lightly armored and armed to fight back. It was simply too medium. Yet somehow, RAF squadron leader Leonard Trent's Ventura was still airborne. Behind him, 11 British bombers littered the Dutch countryside, his entire squadron torn apart in minutes, leaving Trent to face 30 Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s that materialized from nowhere. Now Trent was alone at 7,000 feet, his bomber riddled with holes. Below, the Hemweg power station, Amsterdam's industrial heart, feeding German U-boat production. 4 500-pound bombs, German fighters circling. A medium bomber in a situation that called for a miracle. A smart move should have been obvious. What Trent did next was not. In the early days of the war, the RAF believed its bombers could defend themselves in daylight. The theory was simple. Keep the aircraft in tight formation, load them with defensive machine guns, and push through to the target. But the theory unraveled quickly when tested against the Reich's air defenses. On September 4th, 1939, Bristol Blenheims and Vickers Wellingtons flew low-level attacks on German warships anchored in the Wilhelmshaven roads. The bombers approached at masthead height, expecting surprise to carry them through. Instead, 7 were shot down by concentrated flak in patrolling fighters. 3 weeks later, 5 Hamptons attempted another daylight strike on German naval units in the Heligoland Bight. This time, none returned. The entire formation was wiped out by Messerschmitt 109s rising from Wangerooge airfield. The December 18th Heligoland Bight mission brought the harsh reality into sharper focus. 22 Wellingtons departed England, flying at 10,000 feet to stay above the heaviest flak concentrations. German radar operators at Heligoland had tracked their approach from 60 miles out, providing controllers with precious minutes to position interceptors. Nearly 100 fighters rose to meet them, seasoned pilots from Jägersflottilj 26 and 77, flying the latest Messerschmitt 109Es. The fighters tore into the Wellington formations with devastating precision. 11 bombers were brought down in the initial passes, another ditched in the frigid North Sea, and several more limped home with engines failing and crew compartments shot through. Only one formation had released its bombs over the target. The rest, encountering unexpected civilian housing near the naval installations, held their fire rather than risk non-combatant casualties, a decision that rendered their mission tactically meaningless. The results were sobering. RAF planners had gambled everything on formation flying and power-operated turret guns holding off the Luftwaffe's interceptors. The mathematics of aerial combat had proven them wrong. A single fighter could approach from any angle, fire a concentrated burst, and break away before the lumbering bombers could respond effectively. From early 1940 onward, most of Bomber Command shifted to night operations. The few day bombers that remained, like those in 2nd Group, trained heavily for night flying and were soon operating almost entirely after dark. Yet daylight strikes persisted as Fighter Command launched aggressive sweeps across France and the Low Countries. These circus operations used bombers as bait to provoke air battles, giving Spitfire squadrons chances to engage the Luftwaffe on favorable terms. The missions achieved their tactical goals, but always at a steep price in aircraft and experienced air crews. By 1943, Bomber Command's daylight presence had shrunk to a handful of specialized units operating under heavy fighter escort. Among them, No. 487 Squadron, Royal New Zealand Air Force, flying the American-built Lockheed Ventura. Whether this strategy could succeed where earlier efforts had failed remained an open question. By May 1943, 2nd Group's mission tempo was picking up again, targeting coastal installations in the Netherlands. The rhythm was familiar. Hug the sea at low level, battle climb over land, hit the target, then race back under Spitfire escort. From this pattern, Operation Ramrod 16 was conceived, but it would be more than just routine. It was something else, a carefully choreographed feint. The primary target that day was the IJmuiden steelworks on the Dutch coast. 6 Douglas Boston bombers would go in low and fast, but they were only half the story. The real bait would come from 487th Squadron, Royal New Zealand Air Force, flying 12 Ventura Mark IIs toward a different target entirely, a power station on the northern edge of Amsterdam. The Ventura was a sturdy medium bomber with a 6-man crew, powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engines, delivering up to 2,000 horsepower each. It could reach 320 miles per hour in level flight, but the speed advantage meant little when measured against the nimble fighters it would face. Armed with twin 303 machine guns in the nose and a power-operated dorsal turret mounting twin 303s, it carried up to 3,000 pounds of bombs internally. The aircraft's heavy build gave it impressive range and substantial firepower, but limited maneuverability, a crucial weakness against the Luftwaffe's seasoned interceptor pilots. The aim wasn't just military. Bomber Command's brief described the strike as a signal, something to stir Dutch resistance and encourage workers to push back, however subtly, against German control. Squadron leader Leonard Trent stood at the head of B Flight, a New Zealander known for his square jaw and quiet, steady resolve. With 23 operations already behind him, Trent understood the Ventura's capabilities and limitations intimately. He knew that success would depend not just on reaching the target, but on the precise coordination of timing, altitude, and escort coverage that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophe. The 2 flights, B Flight under Trent and A Flight, led by squadron leader Jack Meakin, agreed to settle who would lead the first wave with a coin toss. When it came to rest, Trent, along with his second-in-command, Flight Lieutenant A.B. Duffel, would be chosen to lead the first 6 Venturas, with Meakin's A Group following behind. The burden of leading the initial strike fell squarely on Trent's shoulders, and he accepted it without hesitation. At RAF Methel that afternoon, 12 Venturas sat dispersed around the airfield, their engines ticking as they cooled from pre-flight inspections. Ground crews made final checks on bomb loads, fuel levels, and defensive ammunition. Each aircraft carried 4 500-pound general-purpose bombs nestled in the internal bomb bay, along with full magazines for the machine guns, 2,400 rounds total for the defensive armament that might be their only protection if the escort failed. Maps were rolled out, and crews gathered around mission boards. It would be a long haul, nearly 40 minutes across open water at just under 1,000 feet, slow enough to avoid radar, but fast enough to stay ahead of trouble. At 10 minutes from the coast, they'd pull into a battle climb to 10,000 feet and make straight for the target. There would be flak. There would almost certainly be fighters. But the order was clear. Press on at all costs. 3 Spitfire squadrons would provide the backbone of escort duty that day, circling high above Ramrod 16's 487th Squadron, waiting for the call to dive. 12 more squadrons were tasked with flying toward Vlissingen as a diversion. Rear support, mostly Polish squadrons flying rotating relays, would orbit off the Dutch coast to cover the bombers on their return. If all went according to plan, the Venturas would bomb at dusk, slip back over the sea under fading light, and disappear into the blue haze of evening. At least, that was the plan. Leonard Trent, leading from the front, was ready. 12 Venturas rumbled down the runway at RAF Methel just before 5 p.m. on May 3, 1943. Their destination lay across the water, the Hemweg power station just north of Amsterdam. One Ventura, flown by Sergeant A.G. Baker, had to turn back shortly after takeoff due to a faulty escape hatch, leaving the formation 1 aircraft lighter. And more trouble was already brewing in the skies above the Netherlands. Unknown to the Venturas, the high cover had jumped the gun. Misjudging the speed difference, the Spitfires meant to shield the Venturas blazed ahead and reached the target well before the bombers. While Trent's formation was still grinding steadily across the North Sea, their protective cover had already passed over the target area and was racing back toward England with fuel running low. Meanwhile, German radio stations along the Dutch coast had detected the diversionary Spitfire sweeps far to the south. By coincidence, many German fighter pilots were already in the Netherlands that day. A Luftwaffe conference was scheduled at Schiphol Airfield near Amsterdam, drawing experienced pilots from across the Western Front. The radar warning had given German controllers precious minutes to position their aircraft. Around 24 Focke-Wulf 190s from the 2nd Group of Jagdgeschwader 1 and 8 Messerschmitt 109s from the 2nd Squadron of Jagdgeschwader 27 climbed to intercept. They were led by Hauptmann Dietrich Wiekup, a group commander of the 2nd Group of JG-1. As the Venturas climbed sharply over the Dutch coast, the clear sky ahead betrayed none of the danger lurking just beyond the horizon. At around 12,000 feet, the Hemweg power station came into view. Its sprawling industrial complex bathed in late afternoon sunlight. The FW-190s climbing toward them were brutal interceptors, built to shred bombers at close range with their powerful radial engines and heavy cannon armament. The BF-109s, lighter and more agile, excelled at high-speed climbs and quick, slashing attacks. The remaining Spitfire squadrons were still climbing desperately to link up when the trap snapped shut. Flight Sergeant Ehrlich later recalled the terrifying moment, quote, "Suddenly, through the intercom, I heard fighters coming in to meet us from below. A moment or two later, I saw German fighters all round our formations. 5 singled us out and began to follow. 3 came behind in line astern, the first about 600 yards away. One squadron, rising from low altitude, was cut off before it could fully form up. Spitfires twisted into defensive spirals as Focke's tore past them, guns blazing. In seconds, the thin fighter's screen was scattered. The German fighters dove straight into the exposed Venturas. With their escort locked in separate dogfights or out of position, the bombers had to press on alone. The mission was already fraying, but the Venturas held formation. There was no turning back now. As combat ramped up, more German aircraft kept vectoring in, tightening the intercept. The Venturas, bulky and lumbering compared to their pursuers, found themselves sitting ducks in the open air. Their defensive machine guns, mostly .303 caliber, offered little more than a fleeting deterrent against the cannon-armed Focke-190s and the faster Messerschmitt 109s that swarmed around them like hawks. Within minutes, the formation began to crumble. One by one, Venturas were caught in the crossfire. Cannon shells tore through engines and fuselages, sending thick plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. Several bombers erupted in flames, the explosions lighting up the fading daylight. The German pilots pressed their advantage ruthlessly. Over 20 fighters from 3 squadrons of the second group of JG-1 fell on 504th and 167th squadrons of the close escort, while 30 more headed directly for the Venturas. Wing Commander Howard at Cowboy Blatchford, leading the escort wing, tried desperately to warn the bombers by radio, but they had already been surrounded. His own Spitfire was badly damaged in the melee. Blatchford came down in the sea, 40 nautical miles off Munsley. Ehrlich recalled, quote, "The intercom went dead, and we had a few peaceful moments, till we were attacked from the front. I didn't see this one come in. He really smashed up the turret. I got nicked in the left side, and one of the guns was hit by cannon shell and knocked out of its mounting." Flight Lieutenant Duffel held his Ventura steady as the formation neared the target. The sky ahead was already streaked with tracers. Then came a flash, an FW-190 diving from above. Cannon shells hit the airframe. The Ventura lurched as hydraulics failed and both engines caught fire. Smoke filled the cockpit. In the rear, the gunners stayed at their posts. One managed to get off a burst, hitting an attacker that spiraled away in flames. Duffel didn't hesitate. With his crew wounded and the aircraft barely holding together, he turned back toward England, leaving a trail of black smoke in the dusk. Others weren't so lucky. Flying Officer O.E. Foster's Ventura shuddered as flak burst nearby. Then came the fighters. A burst of cannon fire struck the nose, detonating the forward gun ammunition and shearing off the front of the aircraft. In the mayhem, the rear gunner, wounded and barely able to stand, pulled himself forward to report that the turret was gone. Moments later, he collapsed. With one engine faltering and the controls damaged, Foster turned for home alone. By the time the Venturas reached their bombing run, only a handful were still airborne, most limping forward, scarred by enemy fire. The rest were spiraling earthward or burning in the sky. Smoke, tracer fire, and falling debris filled the air, painting a grim picture of devastation. Flying at 7,000 feet, Squadron Leader Leonard Trent's battered bomber strained under the weight of a full bomb load. The Hemweg power station lay ahead. Trent's every nerve was screaming with the threat of destruction. His Ventura shook violently as a cannon shell slammed into the fuselage. The Messerschmitt fighter flashed across his windshield, spitting fire. The bomber bucked and lurched, but Trent held her steady. The fixed twin .303 nose guns opened fire, and a stream of bullets tore through the sky. A wall of tracer rounds cut the German fighter just right. Black smoke curled from its engine, flames licking the wings as it spiraled earthward. But the cost was high. His wingmen were already lost, consumed by flak and fighter fire. Behind him, the remaining Venturas were being picked off one by one. At 5:35 p.m., Prince Ventura reached the power station, the target sharp in sight against the fading light. Around him, German fighters tore through the sky, closing fast, cannons spinning, tracers streaking. Trent pressed the throttle forward as bursts of fire ripped into his aircraft. Later, Trent would recall the terrifying final moments, quote, "As we approached Amsterdam, the anti-aircraft guns joined the fighters in a race to see who would get us first. I was surprised that the fighters continued their attacks, and as the powerhouse came into sight, my observer had to direct me. 'Bombs gone,' he called, and I looked up from the instruments to see that we were alone." A sudden, violent jolt shook the lone Ventura. The nose dipped sharply. The airframe twisted under the impact of enemy fire. Flames began to lick along the wings, the plane shuddering wildly. But the ordnance had been released. The explosions blossomed below, lighting the target with fierce orange flashes. The power station was hit. No sooner had the bombs exploded than the damage worsened. Trent recalled, quote, "The spin was so rapid that I was not getting anywhere until at about 7,000 feet, the machine suddenly broke up and I found myself outside. My navigator was also thrown out, but unfortunately, the others were trapped in a portion of the wreckage." Trent and his navigator, Flight Lieutenant Vivian Phillips, were thrown free, their parachutes blossoming against the darkening sky. Behind them, the flaming wreckage plunged toward the flat fields below. The other two crew members, trapped inside, could not escape the doomed bomber. Trent and Phillips drifted down through the cold dusk, the earth rising fast beneath their chutes. They landed hard in the flat fields behind enemy lines. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered. Maybe they could slip away, vanish into the shadows. But the crack of boots shattered that chance. German soldiers appeared suddenly, closing the net. Trent and Phillips were seized and made prisoners before they could even find their bearings. From the air to captivity, Trent's war shifted instantly. He was transported to Stalag Luft 3, a maximum security prisoner of war camp nestled deep in eastern Germany's forests, far from the front lines. The camp was designed to contain the most dangerous Allied airmen, pilots, navigators, and aircrew who might attempt escape. Trent refused to surrender his spirit. Early in his imprisonment, he became involved in the intricate escape plans that defined life inside Stalag Luft 3. The prisoners had been digging tunnels, 3 of them, nicknamed Tom, Dick, and Harry, in a massive coordinated effort to break free. He helped conceal sand from tunnel digging, a deceptively simple yet vital task. Every grain of sand that surfaced, he would recognize it instantly as evidence of digging. Prisoners would walk the compound with bags hidden in their trousers, slowly releasing sand through holes in the fabric. Others would dig small gardens and mix the sand with darker soil from the surface. As one of the security officers, Trent also helped coordinate the complex network of lookouts and intelligence that kept the escape operation secret. The prisoners had developed an elaborate system of signals and warnings to alert diggers when German guards approached the tunnel entrances. By March 1944, the escape was ready. On the night of March 24th, Trent was among 76 men who entered the tunnel system. He was the 79th man scheduled to crawl through the narrow, suffocating passage that stretched more than 300 feet under the camp's wire and guard towers. The tunnel exit, however, fell short of the planned location. Instead of emerging in the safety of woods beyond the camp's perimeter, escapees found themselves only yards from a guard tower. As Trent emerged from the tunnel opening and prepared to crawl away into the night, a patrolling sentry spotted movement in the darkness. The guard's shout shattered the silence. Searchlights blazed to life, and the camp erupted in chaos. Trent was immediately recaptured and thrown into solitary confinement, stripped of the brief hope of freedom that had sustained him through months of planning. The cost of the Great Escape was devastating. Of the 76 men who made it out of the tunnel, only 3 reached safety. Most were recaptured within days. In a brutal act of reprisal, 50 of the escaped prisoners were executed by the Gestapo on Hitler's direct orders. Trent was among the fortunate who were returned to camp rather than executed. He remained imprisoned until May 2, 1945, when advancing British forces liberated Stalag Luft 3. 5 days later, he was back in England. In the post-war months, As the full story of Operation Ramrod 16 became known, King George VI presented Trent with the Victoria Cross. His navigator, Vivian Phillips, received the Distinguished Service Order for his part in pressing home the attack against overwhelming odds.